I was going to talk about this last week, but I didn't have the opportunity. But I wanted to let everybody know about what's going on in terms of working with other churches. We're often preaching, and I, in one sense, prefer to tell you about the things of the Bible. But I wanted to let everybody know what's going on amongst the other churches. There's this sense in which we come to this church, and we think, especially if you're a member here, Bromley Town Church, this is the church. And we forget that, of course, we are a church, but we're one of many churches, and actually all the churches are the church, which represents the body of Christ around the world. And so as far as Bromley is concerned, in fact, if you think about central Bromley, then we are involved with churches that are in central Bromley, but we're also involved with churches across the borough. And that's what I want to explain a little bit about to you this morning, just so that we have a better understanding. Because there's a lot of different things that are happening in terms of churches working together, which we are involved with. And sometimes you don't even know that because it's not talked about on a Sunday morning. And therefore, we can lose sight of the fact that actually we are part of not just Bromley Town Church, but we are actively part of God's church and what God is doing in this borough. And of course, then that can be amplified to say we're part of what God's church is doing around the world. Even the collecting of that money for Ukraine, that money is going out to churches in Moldova, where people have come across the border and they're looking for homes and they're looking for food, they're looking for support because they've had to leave, as we know, they've had to leave Ukraine. Well, our money is going out to other churches, so it's just going to another part of the body, as it were, who are helping the people there, and that money can then go and help those in an excellent way. Let me just read to you Psalm 133. It's only a short psalm, and it says this: "How wonderful and pleasant it is when brothers live together in harmony. For harmony is as precious as the anointing oil that was poured over Aaron's head, that ran down his beard and onto the border of his robe. Harmony is as refreshing as the dew from Mount Hermon that falls on the mountains of Zion. And there the Lord has pronounced his blessing, even life everlasting." There's something that is very powerful when we stand together in unity of heart and purpose. It's a place when we come together as churches that actually says that's the place where God says, look, I want to bless this. I want to bless this work as those who are in different areas, in different ways of worshiping, in different places, but they come together with one heart and they're producing a work of God. And that, when it happens, has unity and it declares the things of the kingdom of God. Helen Keller, a Christian, said this: "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." And that's a principle that we really want to take hold of when we're talking about unity. And this is what Henry Ford said, the guy who produced all the cars. Not that he's still producing them himself, because he's no longer with us, but this is what he said. He said, "Coming together is a beginning, staying together is a process, and working together is actually success." So there's that idea of, look, coming together is just the beginning of something. And you know, when you come together with some people who you don't know, you've got to get to know them, you've got to get used to them, you've got to start working with them. But as that happens, there's something, it begins to get easier. Things begin to flow. And then when you really work together, you can create so much more success. And that is what we are seeing already happen across the borough in terms of churches working together. But it's something that we want to continue to see and ask God to bless. Now, in Central Bromley here, we are part of what is called Churches Together in Central Bromley. In other words, that's a churches together, churches who come together, who talk together, but they're in a small location. And for us, that's identified by our town centre. Let me mention just a few of the churches that are part of that. St. Peter and St. Paul's Church, which is the parish church behind Primark. St. Mark's Church, which is at the other end of the high street, down by Bromley South. And also down there is Bromley Christian Centre. Then, of course, there is Bromley Baptist Church. There is St. John the Evangelist. Not forgetting across the road, the Salvation Army. Brook Lane Community Church. Bromley Methodist Church. Bromley URC. St. Joseph's Catholic Church. St. Mary's College Road. The Ark Mission, that was previously called Cornerstone. St Andrew's in Burnt Ash Lane, Bromley and Shepherd's College, and Hope Church at Bromley North. These are some of the churches that are part of what we are called churches together in central Bromley. Now, it's out of this grouping, for instance, that we had the pulpit exchange in January. And you remember, if you were here on that morning, then the Reverend Andrew McClellan came and preached excellently here, and I went off to Bromley Methodist Church on that day. And the Good Friday march, let me just come to that. The march, I think there might be being organised that the march, if you want to do that, you would go and meet at St Peter and St Paul and walk down to the High Street. In effect, the gathering is going to be just next door to Pret. There's an empty shop there, and that's where we've been allowed to put up a stage. So it's really down this end of the High Street, and it's more of a wander, if you know, a wander from here to there. So not so much of a march, but that is happening. I really want to encourage you, if you've never been to that, it's great to have as many Christians out celebrating the fact that Jesus has come, that he affects our lives, that he can bring transformation to our lives. And we're making a public declaration, singing some songs, praying some prayers of blessing over our town. It's a tremendous public act of being a Christian. And that's happening at 11 o'clock, just around about 11 o'clock, anyway, just after 11, on Good Friday, just for 45 minutes. And as you've heard, that we'll be serving hot cross buns and tea and coffee and that here afterwards. So if you go to that, then do please come in and celebrate with us on that. And that's being led by our town centre chaplain, who is Agneta. And I need to get Agneta down here so that you can meet her yourselves as well. So that's what we're doing as part of the churches together in Bromley, and we're part of Central Bromley. But there's also what I want to talk to you about, which we are part of, is a group called Transform Bromley Borough. And I want to just tell you a little bit about how that came about, because there's a history to that. For many, many years, there's been what is called the Bromley Evangelical Fellowship. And that was, again, a gathering of evangelical churches, those who believe in the preaching of the gospel, who believe in the truth of the Bible. They are coming together and seeking to do things together. And that has been around for many, many years. And I was leading the BEF for some time, and we were doing all sorts of things. In fact, if you remember back to 2012, when we had the Olympic Games, then we organised a big gathering in Queen's Gardens down in Shortlands, when we had a big screen up and we watched the opening ceremony together, and we just told people about the fact that the church was here and the church was building community, and we had lots of people involved in that. It was a great success. And because of that coming together and that working together, then in actual fact we were able to move on and do a number of other things. And this was primarily with churches like Brook Lane Community Church, Cornerstone Christian Centre, now called the Ark, as I mentioned that, Jubilee Church in Southlands Road, Bromley Common Baptist Church. The pastor of that now is actually at Green Street Green Baptist Church. Sorry for all these names. But having done the Olympic event, we then went on to work with another group called Sublime, and we put on something at the Churchill Theatre. Again, some of you will remember that event, where we had Andrew Palau came and preached the gospel, and we actually had LZ7 doing some of the things that they do for young people. That was so good, actually, that LZ7 thing, that we had them back to do a mission in schools in 2015. And we also conducted what was called a faith action audit at that time, where we got information about all the churches across the borough, what they were doing, what they were involved in, what sort of outreach activities they were doing, what sort of toddler groups was going on. And we presented that to the council so that the council knew this is what the church is doing in the borough. And it communicates the fact that individual churches might think, oh, we're only doing a little thing. But when you add that together, it just goes to show this is the work that's happening. And when you add that up in terms of volunteer hours, and then you were to say, well, if we were to pay those volunteers, how much would that work actually cost if we actually had to pay for it? And you see suddenly there's millions and millions of pounds worth of good that is being given into our communities through the church. So that was a great thing to do, the Faith Action Audit. In 2016, we organised a walk together. We went from the highest point of the borough down into the center of the borough, praying as we went and asking God to bless this borough and to move. And that Christmas time, we had J. John come and do a Christmas celebration at St. Mary's Church in College Road, again bringing churches together. 2017 saw us do another mission with LZ7 in the schools in the borough. And at this time, things have begun to get a little bit more momentum. And we were contacted by a guy called Chris Ruddle. And Chris Ruddle's work was that he would seek to link together the different churches together groupings. So I've mentioned the fact that we're part of churches together in central Bromley, but then there's a churches together in Bromley Common, and then there's a churches together in Chislehurst, and there's a churches together in the Crays. And so you've got all these different groupings, and he came and spoke to us and said, look, how can we link all of those together? And so we spoke to Paul Wright, who is the Archdeacon of Bexley and Bromley. So he's the Church of England guy that helps to gather those churches of England. And he got all the different leaders of the various churches together groupings together, and we talked to them, and we said, okay, how can we seek to bring the church together as one? Now, obviously, not everybody wants to be involved. People are individuals. Don't we all in our families know that there are individuals, especially if you've got brothers and sisters, and now perhaps you've grown up and you're married or something, or you've moved away from home. You know that your brothers and sisters have different ways of living their lives, of doing things. And so it is in the church. There's different expressions of how worship is carried out. We all know that. But what we want to do is to say, how can we, as the church, actually speak the voice of God across our borough? It's from that gathering that we managed to actually start something called Transform Bromley Borough. And that the leadership of Transform Bromley Borough is Derek Hull from Jubilee Church, Lisette Hill, who's also from that church, David Wood, who's now, as I said, at Green Street Green Baptist Church, Andrew Junaid from Brook Lane, Angela Short, who is at Coppice Community Church, Tony Hall, who's at Hope Church in Bromley, a guy called Nelson Pallister from Christchurch Bromley, myself, Matthew Fitter from Christchurch Annerley, and of course Paul Wright, who is the Archdeacon, although he has now retired, and we're waiting to find out who the next Archdeacon is going to be. So we got together and we then were able to actually formulate, transform Bromley Borough. In other words, let's do something to bring the leaders of these churches together. And so we started to have some breakfast meetings. The first breakfast meeting, it's always good to gather around a plate of egg and bacon. That seems to help people come to a meeting. And then on from that, you can talk about things. And we met at the Warren, the police sports centre in Hayes, a venue that's not a church, but a venue that can provide the catering, that can provide the facilities, that can provide the space where the church leaders can come together. And so 2018, we had our first breakfast there, gathering the pastors together, which was a great time. And we've continued to have those breakfasts from that time. 2019, as I say, the breakfast meetings continued, only 3 times a year, I might add, not every week. And just in case you thought that's all we do is just have breakfast, because I can see 1 or 2 of you are thinking that. In 2019, we had a week of mission with the Turning, which I know those of you who are here actually got involved with that here. But that was across the whole borough, where there was a mission outreach across the whole borough with all of these churches. And things were gaining momentum. There was gaining momentum with the council. There was a sort of a subgroup that would actually meet with councillors every now and again, and they're particularly talking about the issue of homelessness. How can the church help with the issue of homelessness? Now, when you come to the council, the one thing the council want to deal with is not 125 churches across the borough. We haven't got time for that. But if we can meet with just a few people who represent all of the churches across the borough, that's very good for us. It saves time, it saves effort, and it means we can get some more meaningful dialogue. And that particularly happened around the issue of homelessness. And that's been working. And you'll see how that had some impact as time goes on. 2019, as I said, we did the Turning mission together. We come out of 2019 into 2020, which of course is COVID, lockdown, change, and all of that stuff which we feel like we're coming through. Still that sense of coming through, I think. But we're coming through that, but that created complete change. Suddenly the churches were being shut. Suddenly they couldn't come together. Suddenly everybody's separated. So what did? Well, we managed to put some prayer meetings online, which actually brought the church leaders together. So through that time, there was a regular time of meeting. In fact, it was once a month that we had an online prayer meeting where at least people could connect. Even if it was only for a short time, there was that point of connection. But at the very early start of 2020, with the lockdown, the council, now having some relationship with the leadership of Transform Bromley Borough, they came to them and said, we've got problems in terms of people needing food, and how is food being delivered, and how can we see the food banks that gather across the borough, how can we see them coming together? Is there anything that you can help us with? Now that's a big challenge. This is the council coming to the church and saying, what can the church do to help? Well, I'm very glad to say what actually came out of that was that we were able to join together the various food projects that were happening through churches, and so that they could be operated from one hub, a single distribution point, and that many people could be helped. Now, I need to explain a little bit more about what actually happens with food in the borough in terms of food provision for those who don't have enough. There has been for many, many years something called the Trussell Trust, and they have established food banks. There was one established in the Crays, and now that has increased. And the Trussell Trust have been in Bromley as a food bank, operating as a food bank for many years. The Trussell Trust operate on a basis of you need to be able to get a piece of paper that says, yes, you can get food. So it operates on a selective basis. Now, there's lots of areas where you can get the food from, or people who can provide the slip of paper you need. Schools, for instance, doctors' surgeries, churches. So there's lots of places where people can connect to, but you need to get the bit of paper. A family would then go to the food bank and they can get 3 days full supplies for their family. Very, very good project, and it's still in existence and doing a great work. But they have been operating and working like that for some years. But what if I don't necessarily connect to the doctors? What if I couldn't get that bit of paper? What if I need help every week, not just every now and again? Where do I go to? And so there's some things that the Trussell Trust do, but because they've got to put some parameters around what they do, it also creates some difficulty. And so therefore, there's a number of churches across the borough who are actually saying, well, look, we've got a food bank, and look, it's just to come along. If you have a need, come to us and we'll see what we can help you with, that type of thing. And it wasn't the Trussell Trust food banks that needed to be organized. It was actually gathering what was going on around the churches. So which churches have got food banks? And there was found to be quite a number. There are actually 12 churches that are involved with actually giving out food. Bromley Christian Centre being one. Christ Church Annerley, Christ Church Orpington, Citygate Beckenham, Downham Mutual Aid, that goes out of Brook Lane, Hayes Community Food, which goes out of Hayes URC, Hope Church as the distribution centre in Orpington, Living Well, which is located at Holy Trinity in Penge, Mottingham Food Bank, which is at St Edward's in Mottingham, St Nicholas Church, Orpington, Unity Church on the Ramsden Estate, and Whitefoot and Downham, which is also run with Brook Lane Community Church. So there was those different food banks, and what we were able to do is to bring all of those food banks together with one distribution centre, which is now set up at Hope Church in Orpington. And so food could be delivered. Fair Share, which is another charity which gathers going out of date, as it were, fresh groceries. They can bring them, they want to give them away, so they bring them to a distribution point, and then the food is gathered out over the various food banks. This has now been set up. This has now been working since the beginning of 2020 through Transform Bromley Borough, and you are part of that. This is the thing I want to try to communicate to us. Because we're part of Transform Bromley Borough, we are actually involved with the things that they do. Now, we don't give food every week, and we're not giving food out. Well, we do sometimes give food out to one or two who come to our door. But generally speaking, we're not operating as a food bank. but we are connected to those who are, and we are supporting that work. And as you saw a couple of weeks ago, we did have a gathering of food, and we sent it off to the Whitefoot and Downham Food Bank because they had need. So we were actively entering into helping them out. In January, over 2,000 people across the borough of Bromley were being fed each week. Each week. And that is still carrying on as a similar number at the moment. It's good for us to know that we are connected and working together in this way. Because, sometimes you think like, well, we hear the need. Well, what's the church doing about it? The church in this borough is actively helping to support many thousands of people each week with food, and you are connected to that. I find that encouraging, and we should be encouraged to know that we're part of what's going on. I know it doesn't always mean that we're putting our hands in our own pockets, but I think as time goes on, what we're hoping to do is actually generate more of a coming together of churches, maybe a more collecting of goods or finances each week, because I think the food pressure need is only going to increase across the borough. And I don't know how you feel about it, and I know that we can't all meet all of the need. But what we're looking at is, if I can do my small part together with many others, and it's all connected together, then maybe the church can be a great way of helping to feed those who do not have enough money for food because of the various pressures that are upon us. Now, I'm very glad to say that actually Transform Bromley Borough was put forward for an award for the work that happened with the food project, and by the council, that is. And we won to the 2021, or we were one of those who won an award at the London Faith and Belief Community Awards. So that's just an encouragement. Again, you won't necessarily have known about that, but we're part of that, and that's what's going on. Now, very briefly, and I have to say briefly because of the time, I just want to let you know the other things that are going on, again, that you are involved with, that we are involved with because of being together with the other churches. Through Transform Bromley Borough, there is the Bromley Homelessness Project, and that is the night shelter, the winter night shelter. You will have heard about this. That is not running at the moment, but that runs from like the end of November to the end of February, and it's providing a place for people who would be on the streets, a place for them to sleep overnight, a meal each evening to look after them. It's not doing everything, but it's doing something to help that situation. And not only is it putting people up, it's also connecting other parties into those people. So housing officers from Bromley Council, that some people have been giving their time in terms of doctors and actually coming and giving medical attention and things like that as well. And of course, general support, which is so important. And Angela, who's at Coppice Mission, she's been particularly helpful with Ed Tree as far as helping that project move forward. Again, moving together as churches, Christians Against Poverty were able to come to the borough and set up a project. So there's a Christians Against Poverty, a CAP partnership, where a number of churches actually help to support that work, but that work is then helping the whole borough. And so Christians Against Poverty is working in areas across the borough to help people with financial pressures and to lead them through into a debt-free life, which is really encouraging. And we here have actually a CAP job club. At the moment, it's on a Tuesday morning for various sites. It runs like 3 times a year here, where we're helping people to get back into employment. So they come and they can connect here, they can learn skills, they can get encouragement in terms of finding jobs. So that's all part of what Christians Against Poverty are doing, but through the connections that Transform Bromley Borough and the churches working together are doing. And just recently, well, it hasn't actually officially started, but it's about to start. There's another new project that is happening amongst the churches, which is called Hope into Action. And we are, again, involved in this. Hope into Action is a charity that was started, which is designed to actually get houses and therefore to rent space in those houses for people who have various needs. Let me explain a little bit more how it started. There's a guy called Ed Walker who had been working for Tear Fund. He comes back from having been on a project overseas, sitting in a park, and he meets a guy sitting on the bench next to him. He starts talking to him. What's the problem with you? What's going on? Where are you living? I've got nowhere to live. I've just come out of prison, the guy says. And he was just unfolding his life before Ed. And Ed was thinking, like, well, this is ridiculous. The church must be able to do something about this. He lives in Peterborough, by the way. So he challenged himself, come on, what can we do to help this guy? And he was ringing people up to find out, and he found, actually, there might be some home provision for this guy, but actually there's not family provision. And so out of that, there began a project of let's get a house. So the church got a house, and they got people to support, and then they got people who are ex-prisoners to come into that house, and then as a church, they helped them. They were family around them. They encouraged them. They helped them pay their bills. They helped them live life. They gave them friendship. They gave them food. They gave them support. They were just family. And I don't know how much experience you have with people who have various needs. But one thing I have learned is this: they lack family. It's not that they don't know people. They know many people. They know many ways of getting money. They know many ways of getting schemes. They know many ways of perhaps doing wrong. Don't we all? But they don't have family around them to support them and to encourage them, people that they can learn to trust. And when you learn to trust somebody and love them, things can begin to change. And so this project is starting in Bromley. A house has been given to the project by one of the churches. Somebody had left a house in their will or something, I think, and they had a spare house. So we have a house already. It sort of started the wrong way around. We've got a house. Now we're setting up the project. Now, eventually, we're going to get people to come into that. In fact, we've got two houses, but one is being given over to refugees from Iran, I think. The other house is going to be set up as this project. And so there will be people coming into that house. And as it's not near this church, but it's near another church, then people in that church will act as family around that and encourage these people. The vision of the project is that eventually investors might come and purchase other houses, because it's very difficult, obviously, to buy houses in this area. But some people have money. And you know what? If you can collect people together and you can say, like, we will pay you, it may not be the full amount of interest, but we can pay you 1.5% return on your capital each month. Put it all together, buy a house, get people in the house, get people off the streets, get people away from the prisons, get people loved and cared for by church families, so that they may have a fresh start in life that will really help them. These are some of the things that are happening in this borough through us, even though we don't always know that we're involved with it, but we're part of it. And what we need to realize is we're part of something that is greater than just who we are here. We do things amongst ourselves here, but I think it's good for everybody to know, do you know what? When it comes to CAP, we can say, Christians Against Poverty, who's that? Well, it's Christians Against Poverty. We're involved with it because we have a CAP job club here. But not only that, because we're part of Transform Bromley Borough, because we're linked with the other churches and we're working together. It's the same with the food projects, as I say. It's not that, it would be lovely if we did a food project. We're already involved with food projects. Just because it's not happening in our building, it doesn't matter. Not everybody is living around here has that food poverty, but they're in different areas of Bromley. But what we can do is stand with other churches and serve those people and know that it is bigger than us. It's the body of Christ that is seeking to reach people, touch people, not only practically, but we all know when friendships develop and trust develops, you can tell people about the real reason we're doing it, which is because Jesus came to die for us. He gave his life to set us free. And he rose again from the dead, as I said earlier, because he has the power over sin and death. He has conquered death. He is the one who can bring transformation to our lives. That's what Christianity is all about. It's knowing that God is real and that he really can help us and change us. Change us from being who we were, broken, sinful, wretched people, although we wouldn't call ourselves wretched, but we know what it was to be wretched. We knew what it was to be sinful. And we know how good it is when you have tasted and seen how good God is. You know you don't want to go any other way. This is part of the church. This is part of what we are. It's part of what we're involved with. And it's great to know that it's not just us here, but it's a bigger thing around Bromley. Amen.